I actually, I actually had one of the things that really motivated me more than anything was I read an article by Dr. Cooperstein in Dynamic Chiropractic that really talked about proto-researchers. And I thought, gosh, this seems so familiar. And then I started looking at it and I realized, and he was so kind in how he discussed the, Dr. DeJarnette, but it was also very powerful in how it made me think about what was going on in the 1930s and 40s and what was being thought of. And one of the things is that you have to understand in context. I'm going to describe a study that Dr. DeJarnette did. Was that Dr. DeJarnette was badly injured in an accident when he was 19 years old at a Ford foundry where he was a group of 10 or 12 students who were selected to be part of a think tank to develop ways of smelting and utilizing steel and stuff in new ways. And he never had a lot of money. He always told me stories how he never had a lot of money. And he would go out and get lunch for everybody. They'd give him a penny, and he'd get like maybe 15 cents, and that was a sandwich. And he'd be walking back with everyone's food, and there was an extreme explosion. Everyone in the building was killed. He was thrown about 60 feet. He said all he remembers he was unconscious, and then he remembers that someone was covering his head with a blanket, saying, "Oh, here's another one that's passed." And he said it took all his strength to get the sheet off of his head because they were going to cart him off. And he had trouble walking, moving. He found that he tried to osteopathic care, chiropractic care, and found that they all helped him somewhat, and he decided to go to school to get care there, but he was not satisfied with where he was, and he felt that there needed to be something that could be done better. And so he decided that if he was going to be a health practitioner, he was going to try to find ways of developing pre- and post-assessment tools to be able to figure out how to help patients. Again, as early as 1935, DeJarnette was a featured speaker presenting clinical research at the 40th anniversary convention of the National Chiropractic Association. He was a voice of research at a time where it was not actually respected or appreciated or interested. Chiropractic wasn't interested in research at that time. He really was pushing for trying to determine what chiropractors to do, why they were doing it, if it was right or not. He was only 42 years old, 17 years in practice, and he'd already written 22 books. And just so you get a flavor for it, the first book, this one, Sacro Occipital Technique of Spinal Therapy, is over 700 pages, extremely well written, and he didn't have a computer. He had to type every page out. It just, his 1939 book on bloodless surgery, still to this day, is beyond anything that we're doing with regards to treating viscerosomatic issues and visceral directly. So it's just, I don't know how he developed this stuff. I don't know where he got a lot of his information. One of the things that we had at a conference last year that discussed his history, I found out that he had both a photographic memory and he was able to look at a page at a time and taking that information. It made him a little bit impatient with others because he assumed everybody else could do it too. And so a frustration. But people would go to his libraries and he had thousands of books, and they'd look at the books they would hardly ever touch because he would just flip through them and then he got it. So it was kind of interesting. So in 1941, DeJarnette felt confident unless if you were actually going to produce a subluxation of a vertebra, actually put it out of position and then study what it looked like, we wouldn't know what we're talking about. So he asked what would happen if we subluxated a fifth lumbar vertebra in that same direction on a group of asymptomatic subjects, and what would be the response to those subjects if we'd subluxated that vertebra. He had a certain inclusion criteria about, and one of those were they had the patients had to be between 18 and 50 years old and what he considered were free of lumbosacral stress symptoms. He was trying to find at least 24 subjects that could stand upright, flex forward completely and touch their fingers to their toes, and then lean all the way backward and not have any pain or discomfort. And he looked at over 200 subjects, and I'm assuming these were his patients, and he found 18 that could fit that inclusion criteria. He put these 18 subjects in front of a distortion analyzer, and something he developed at that time that no one was doing it. He later changed it. This is an early one where the feet were just standing. He later developed foot plates to stabilize the heels and toes in position, and then he would measure where the patient was and develop a plumb line assessment and be able to assess exactly where they were. And he would set them up, and then he would take a camera picture of them, and they would then overlay the pictures and see if there was a difference. Of the 18 subjects, he found 2 that varying each time he would take the picture, and he decided that they were too variable, so he took them out of the study and just picked on 16 that remained. Each of the 16 persons now received the same type adjustment, which was designed to carry a strain on the 5th lumbar vertebra to the right, and repeated that adjustment 4 times, once a day for 4 times. And this is actually, I got this from out of one of his pictures, and it's actually a right lumbar adjustment. So, on the 5th day, each of the 16 subjects were now photographed again while standing in the distortion analyzer. And apparently the subjects were followed without receiving further care for 2 years and assessed for what DeJarnette presumed were health and body reactions to a 5th lumbar vertebra subluxation distortion. Now, he wasn't 100% clear as to what went on with the patients in between. There were some times where he described certain multiple incidental findings, from eczema to different other things. I don't know that we could specifically relate to a 5th lumbar vertebra, particularly over a course of 2 years. Anything's going to happen to patients. But one of the things that was very specific with all the 16 patients is they all developed pain over the left transverse process of the atlas. And none of the 16 prior to the study had any pain to their atlas. Of the 16 subjects in the study that was concluded after 2 years, 14 of the subjects remained. One of the ones that were not able to complete the study went to California, and the other was hospitalized. Wasn't clear why he was hospitalized. At the end of the 2-year study, all the remaining 14 subjects then received a corrective 5th lumbar adjustment carrying the spinous to the left. Of significance, the left transverse of the atlas remained painful on each subject until the correction was completed. However, one of the subjects had an adverse reaction to the corrective adjustment. And this was, he didn't explain, he didn't understand why. That's what he found. The research study, among other things that DeJarnette found, he started his study into what we call the R plus C factors, or the Lovett-brother relationships. We found basically the head related to the pelvis, the atlas related to L5, C2 related to L4, that there were these relationships. And it's just being published now in the Journal of Canadian Chiropractic Association. It should come out this month. And this article it's full free text, so when it gets published out there, you should get a chance to look at it. But a lot of what we're finding, I'm trying to find all kinds of reasons. How can we have these relationships? And one of the main ones that seem to stand out the most appears to be our visual vestibular writing mechanism, and how our body, our eyes and ears level to the horizon at times, and that as we have tilting in one area, our eyes will level off, or vice versa. If we have TMJ problems, malar problems, that tends to cause a reverse thing from the top down. So it can move in either direction. And just talking about Dr. Getzoff and Chinapi's presentation, one of the things I found that interesting is they're doing studies dentally, looking at the TMJ and looking at leg lengths and deficiencies, and they're finding if they put 7 to 8 millimeter lift on one side, it causes them to bite on that same side. They put it on the other side, then they're initiating biting on the other side. And if they then change their bite, it changes how they're posturally able to balance their weight. So we're finding these things going up and down, and everything's intertwined. So with regards to limitations, and the reality is this was done in 1941, Dr. DeJarnette didn't know anything about institutional review board, where you have to do. You have to make sure you're not going to do any sort of unusual procedures on patients that could make them worse. But the big thing is, at that time, there was no real research organization. There was no research grouping of people at that time, and he was on an island by himself trying to figure out stuff, and he was able to do that. He didn't just teach chiropractic method of care, but attempted to develop different research methodologies. And while it's unlikely there'll be future human studies, there are some studies on studying with regards to animals, which are coming up. And in the book, you'll see there's information about that. So it's unlikely that DeJarnette would not be continuing doing research. And hopefully, we will all continue to see more of this. Thank you very much.